Home Secretary.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. With your permission, I will make a statement on a fairer pathway to settlement for migrants. The story of migration in this country is woven through my own. My father came here in the early 70s, my mother a little less than a decade later. Both came to seek a better life, and they found one here. In time, while always proud Kashmiris, they became British citizens themselves, Brummies too, and they brought up 4 children just as proud to be a part of this country and that great city as them. This is not just my story. This is the story of many of my constituents in Birmingham Ladywood, and it is the story of many millions more across this country. I, and so many others like me, are patriots. Mine is a love of a country that is forever changing, while something essential about us always endures. It is a patriotism that finds room for those who trace their roots back many generations, and those who, like me, do not. But I worry that this broad patriotism is, for some, narrowing, and that a vision of a Greater Britain is giving way to that of a littler England, as anger turns to hate. Some will choose to scorn this analysis. They would rather we simply wished it away. But those who look like me do not have that luxury. Our lives and the lives of our families are more dangerous in a country that turns inwards. So we have no choice but to ask, what is the cause of our division and how might this country be united? As I said earlier this week, the pace and scale of migration in this country has been destabilising. I spoke on Monday of the 400,000 who have claimed asylum since 2021. But that figure pales in comparison to the net migration figure in the same period. In that time, 2.6 million more people moved to Britain than left. To place that in perspective, around 1 in every 30 people in this country arrived in those 4 years. This is the result of the extraordinary open border experiment conducted by the last Conservative government. In that period, now sometimes called the Boris wave, immigration controls were drastically lifted. This was most notable in the case of the health and care visa, where minimum salary requirements were dropped. An attempt to fill between 6,000 and 40,000 jobs led to the arrival of 616,000 individuals between 2022 and 2024. Over half were not even filling jobs in the sector at all, but were rather dependents of those who were. And abuse, as any Member of Parliament can tell you, was rife. I would think my support for migration need not be stated, but after some of the questions I faced on Monday, I think I had better do so. Migrant communities have, for generations, been woven into the tapestry of British life. While I will never believe in assimilating communities, we have achieved cohesion because different communities have integrated, retaining their distinction within a single pluralistic whole. This makes demands of those already here to remain open to new arrivals, but more than that, it demands something of those arriving. To settle in this country forever is not a right, but a privilege, and it must be earned. Today, that is not the case. Settlement, or indefinite leave to remain, comes almost automatically after 5 years' residence in this country. At that point, a migrant gains access to many of the rights of a British citizen, including to benefits. As a result of the unprecedented levels of migration in recent years, 1.6 million are now forecast to settle between 2026 and 2030, with a peak of 450,000 in 2028. It's around 4 times higher than the recent average. That will now change. As this government announced in its immigration white paper, the starting point for settlement will move from 5 years to 10. To ensure this is earned, new criteria will be added, which will act as a disqualifying bar for those who do not meet them. Firstly, the applicant must have a clean criminal record. Secondly, they must speak English to A-level standard. Thirdly, they must have made sustained national insurance contributions. And finally, they must have no debt in this country. While these criteria set the bar that everyone must meet, there are a series of other tests that have today been published for consultation, and these either add or subtract from the 10-year qualifying period. To recognise the particular value to society they play, the government proposes the following. Those who speak English to a degree level standard could qualify for a 9-year path to settlement. Those paying the higher rate of tax could qualify at 5 years, while those on the top rate could qualify after 3, the same as those on global talent visas. Those who work in a public service, including doctors, teachers, nurses, would qualify after 5 years, while those who volunteer, subject to this consultation, could qualify at between 5 and 7 years. Not subject to consultation, the partners of British citizens will continue to qualify at 5 years as today. And this is also true of British nationals overseas from Hong Kong, who will qualify at 5 years in honour of our unique responsibilities to them. All grants under the Windrush and EU settlement schemes also remain unchanged. While some will be able to qualify for settlement earlier than 10 years, others will be forced to wait longer. Once again, these are subject to consultation, but the government proposes that those who have received benefits for less than 12 months would not qualify for settlement until 15 years after arrival. For those who have claimed benefits for more than 12 months, that would rise to 20 years. To encourage the use of legal routes into this country, those who arrive illegally could see settlement take up to 30 years. As has already been set out, refugees on core protection will qualify for settlement after 20 years, although those who move to a work and study visa could earn settlement earlier, and those arriving by a safe and legal route would earn settlement at 10 years. This consultation is open on some cohorts of special interest. This includes settlement rights for children, members of the armed forces, and victims of certain crimes. As well as considering the responsibilities that are expected of those who seek a permanent life in this country, the consultation also raises the question of the rights that will be provided. Specifically, it proposes that benefits might not be available to those who have settled status, reserving them instead for those who have earned British citizenship. Finally, this consultation addresses the question of the so-called Boris wave, specifically the cohort of lower qualified workers who entered the country along with their dependents through the health and care visa, some of whom are never expected to be net economic contributors. It is right that we apply more stringent controls for this group, and for that reason we propose they should wait 15 years before they can earn settlement. Crucially, for these and every other group mentioned here, we propose these changes apply to everyone in the country today who has not yet received indefinite leave to remain, though we are seeking views on whether there should be some transitional arrangements available. May I make one thing absolutely clear, though? We will not change the rules for those with settled status today. These are people who have been in our country for years, even decades. They have families here, wives, husbands, children. They've worked in our hospitals, taught in our schools, and have been contributing to our society for years. Fairness is the most fundamental of British values. We made a promise when we gave them settlement, and we do not break our promises. The Reform Party, I note, not present today, have said they will do this most un-British of things. The Tories have said that they will, but then said that they won't, and I am left in as much of a muddle about their policy as they are, that perhaps the Shadow Home Secretary might enlighten the House today. But I can be clear that on this side of the House, we won't change the rules for those with settled status. Madam Deputy Speaker, as this consultation shows, we also listen to the British public, and I encourage all those interested to make their voices heard. Today, I have set out what we propose and perhaps more importantly, why. I love this country, which opened its arms to my parents around 50 years ago. But I am concerned by the division I see now, fueled by a pace and scale of change that is placing immense pressure on local communities. For those who believe that migration is part of modern Britain's story and should always continue to be, we must prove that it can still work, that those who come here contribute, play their part, and enrich our national life. While each will always retain something of who they were and where they came from, they become a part of the greatest multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy in the world. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I, as always, thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. Well, she's had a busy week. I wonder if this burst of hyperactivity has anything to do with her leadership bid. But as her shadow, I will say this: I am rooting for her. I am rooting for her in her tussle with the Health Secretary as to who gets to replace the Prime Minister, although I fear my endorsement may not be entirely helpful with her colleagues on her side of the House. Now, let me start by saying this. Immigration under successive governments has been far, far too high. That has included illegal immigration, which since the general election across the Channel has surged, with 10,000 illegal immigrants crossing just in the 75 days the Home Secretary has been in post alone. Last year, the first year of a Labour government, there were a record ever number of new asylum claims, and the number of illegal immigrants accommodated in hotels has gone up under this Labour government, even though they promised they would reduce numbers. But of course, besides illegal immigration, on which this government is so clearly failing, legal migration has been far, far too high as well, absorbing the equivalent of half the new housing supply in recent years. Allowing mass low-skilled migration is actually bad for the economy, not least when we have 9.5 million working-age people here out of work. And mass low-skilled migration without integration has placed all kinds of pressures on society, not least because there are 1 million people here who don't speak English at all or properly, or the fact there are 10,000 foreign citizens in prison. Where I suspect we do agree is that limited, very limited, high-skill migration is a good thing, but the days of mass low-skill migration must come to an end. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is much in this statement I support, not least because so much of it is so familiar. The idea of a 10-year route to ILR is something that we proposed in amendments to the government's bill, I think around about 9 months ago. Inexplicably, the Labour Party inexplicably voted against those measures here just a few months ago, and now they've adopted them. We also proposed removing benefits from foreign citizens, including those on ILR who don't have British citizenship, and this consultation document now looks at doing the same thing. So I am delighted, Madam Deputy Speaker, to see that the Shadow Home Secretary, upon arrival at number 2 Marsham Street, has got out the copy and paste function on her laptop and started copying and pasting conservative policies. Now, I do, however, have one or two detailed and specific questions, which I am asking in a spirit of constructiveness, given she has adopted so many conservative policies. Now, she said importantly that these policies on ILR qualification would apply to those people here already. She is absolutely right to say that, and I support it. She mentions transitional arrangements. I would just urge her to be very cautious about that, lest it creates loopholes. But does she have an estimate she can give to the House as to when these new measures will be implemented? Because the rules that she referred to took effect, I think the previous rules around legal migration started in January 2021. So those people arriving on those rules will become, under the present ILR rules, eligible from January 2026, just a few weeks' time. So when will these changes get implemented? I hope as soon as possible. Now, she also mentions that to qualify for ILR at 10 years, you need to have made national insurance contributions. I've tried to get through the consultation document in the last half an hour. I think I'm right in saying that the qualifying threshold is to have earned £12,570 for a period of 3 years. She'll perhaps correct me if I've got that wrong. But that does strike me as a very low level of earnings, and I would urge her to consider setting that level higher. 12,500 for 3 years would not represent a net economic contribution to this country. I think that threshold should be set a great deal higher, and I would urge her to seriously consider that. Now, she also mentions the possibility of volunteering, getting people ILR at 5 years rather than 10. We know how people game the system when it comes to immigration, for example, by pretending to convert to Christianity to get asylum. So I would urge her to just draft those rules very carefully and be extremely cautious about that, lest she creates some loopholes. I would also ask her to consider adopting one last Conservative policy, since she appears so enthusiastic about them, and that is to introduce a binding cap on legal migration, voted for by Parliament each year, so this House can democratically decide what the level of inward migration is. She's adopted so many of her other policies. I strongly urge her to adopt that last one as well.
Home Secretary.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I suppose I should start by saying I'm pleased to see that the Leader of the Opposition let the Shadow Home Secretary have a go today. He seems rather overly concerned about my personal future. May I suggest that he should worry about his own and that of his party? And one good way to secure the potential future of the Conservative Party would maybe start with an open and honest acknowledgement of their track record in government. Yeah. Dare I say it? Maybe even an apology for messing up the system so badly in the first place. I have to say, given their current track record, they barely have the right to ask questions, let alone propose solutions. Like settlement, it's my view that you have to earn the right to offer solutions, and I would say to him, one way of earning that right would be to apologise for what the Tories did first and foremost. He asked a specific question in relation to when these changes will come into effect. It's a 12-week consultation. It will end in the middle of February, and we would anticipate making changes and to begin the phase-out of those changes once adopted from April 2026 of next year. As he knows, the immigration rules usually change twice a year, every year, and that is when we would begin to start making some of those changes. Some potential changes would require technical fixes and solutions that may take a little longer, but the intention is to start from April of next year. He made the point on the qualifying threshold around £12,000. He will note that that's the national insurance contributions threshold that we have used, and that is specifically because that is one of the quickest ways to establish whether somebody is in work or not. So it's designed to give an indication of the period spent in work. He will, of course, know that there are different income thresholds for the different routes by which people can come into the country, and those are not being changed. He made a valid point on ensuring that the new system, as we develop it, mustn't have any loopholes. I will, of course, be very alive to that, and as we discussed at length in the House on Monday, there is a relationship between some types of visa overstaying and, of course, coming straight into the asylum system as well, and I'm very alive to those risks, and we will do everything we can to shut that down. This will be, in the end, a whole package of reforms across both the illegal migration system and dealing with asylum, as well as legal migration, to clamp down on abuse and retain public confidence in running a migration system overall and in the asylum system in particular. And what can I say on the cap? I mean, the cap has had a long life in the Conservative Party, and I would just gently say they never managed it in 14 years themselves. I don't think we're going to be pursuing that failure now.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I applaud my right honourable friend on many points, not least debunking the idea that a cap is going to solve anything or is even achievable. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a lot of detail in this, but one of the issues now is that people currently going through the system have to apply repeatedly to extend their discretionary leave to remain until they reach settlement status. This is costly for them, cumbersome for the Home Office, and does nothing to help them integrate or work in the community. I've had the opportunity to meet with her junior minister on this issue. Can she give any assurance to the House that the Home Office is looking at this to ensure that those who are welcome here have a less burdensome system to go through, which will also hopefully save money and enable the Home Office to focus on more urgent issues?
While my right honourable friend brings a huge amount of personal experience to this discussion, having been a minister herself and with a very august track record as a select committee chairwoman, so I will always take very seriously any suggestions that she makes, and I will discuss with my ministerial team the detail of some of what she suggests. I think our principled position is it is right that people pay fees for visa extensions. It is right that we move from a 5-year to a 10-year period, a qualifying period for settlement. We're not consulting on whether we move from 5 years to 10 years. That is already decided policy. What is set out in the consultation are some of the other questions that sit underneath that. But I would happily discuss with her, because I know she has big experience in this area, Home Office capacity and how we build a system that can work effectively, not only in terms of being delivered by the state, but providing certainty for the people that ultimately do want to make their lives in this country.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before I begin, I beg your forgiveness in taking a few extra seconds to reflect on the exchanges in this chamber on Monday. I would like to use the opportunity to put on the record my utter contempt for those who abuse the Home Secretary and anybody else who is abused based on the colour of their skin or their religion. That is not what Britain stands for. The Home Secretary, of course, will choose the language that she wants to use in this debate, and I will choose my language too. The constructive and moderate tone of voice that I and the Liberal Democrats will use in these discussions about immigration will remain, as will our attempts to help offer feedback as and when the government brings forward proposals. The number of Liberal Democrats in the chamber today shows that we are not ignoring this. Indeed, we've got as many in the chamber today as the whole of the Reform Party, and none of them are here. We're aware, as others, of the issues in communities up and down in the country, and for immigrants who live here too. We agree with the Home Secretary that faith must be restored in the immigration and asylum system, as I stated on Monday, and we agree that requires changes to policy. And of course, most of what we're discussing today is distinct from some of the discussions we were having on Monday about desperate refugees and asylum seekers. We also believe that it must be acknowledged that prior to Brexit and the removal of nearly all safe and legal routes, this country had a more rational and controlled approach to immigration and asylum. That party is responsible. We think it is regrettable that the government has not made quicker progress towards building stronger links with Europe in its work on getting control of our immigration policy. And we believe that discussions about regaining control must also come with a proper discussion about the opportunities that provides and the potential risks. Changes to pathways to settlement must be with regard to the economy, to public services and fairness to individuals. We are concerned about the chilling effect some changes could have on the economy. The UK is fast becoming a less competitive place for science and innovation, not least because of Brexit. The cost of a 5-year global talent visa to Britain is £6,000 per person. That is around 20 times more expensive than comparable visas in our competitor countries, where similar schemes typically cost a few £100s. It is no surprise that so few researchers come to Britain on these visas every year. Cancer research alone spends £900,000 annually, money that could be better spent on setting up research labs instead. The government must also be careful about the effect its rhetoric and policy will have on our public services. The NHS is heavily reliant on nurses and staff who are not British nationals. So has the Home Secretary made an assessment of the risks that some will leave, and what steps is this government taking to develop domestic talent in the health and care sector?
Thank you. I thank the Lib Dem spokesperson. I don't propose to revisit the detail of our exchanges on Monday, but what I will say to him is I will always listen to constructive contributions wherever they come from in this House, and I will reflect on the points that the Liberal Democrats will be making in order to be constructive. One thing where we will perhaps continue to disagree is I think it's just important we acknowledge that there is concern across our country. It is not made up, and it does demand answers of politicians. And that is a point of, I hope now, agreement between us. I think he made a point in relation to the asylum system. Forgive me, I didn't pick it up directly, so if I don't address it now, he's welcome to write to me on that point. Again, I don't propose to go into the details that we discussed discussed on Monday on the asylum policy statement, but one of the things that I did make very clear is the number of those arriving on small boats in this country is exactly the same almost as the number that overstay visas. So there is a relationship here in the overall migration system between legal migration and then illegal migration, and that overstaying and then coming straight into the asylum system, and in particular into asylum accommodation at the point at which a visa ends and somebody overstays, is a very real problem with very real significant numbers of people doing that, and that is something that I think it is incumbent on us to resolve, and that is what the totality of all of these reforms are designed to do. He will, of course, know that the government has made huge strides in resetting our relationship with the European Union, and these are matters that we discuss very closely with our counterparts in Europe, and I think that the progress since the EU reset has been considerable, and we will continue to build on that. Once again, though, I don't propose to revisit old debates. We live in a new reality, and we are forging a new path ahead. We will, of course, want to give certainty to people who are already in this country. That is what we are doing with the consultation that we have set, and I have given certainty, for example, to British citizens who wish to bring their dependents over, those who are here from Hong Kong, where our arrangements will not change, Windrush grants, EU settlement grants as well, none of which are affected by the consultation. People have known for a while, since the government published its immigration white paper, that the qualifying period would move from 5 years to 10. He made a point about fairness to individuals. I would just gently say I agree about that, because fairness and certainty to those who've come here to work and make a contribution to our economy is absolutely important. I think what our reforms are designed to do, however, is also to think of fairness to those who are already here and building public confidence in the system overall. He made some points on the National Health Service, and I know that the Secretary of State for Health takes very seriously future labour market reforms and making sure there is a pipeline of the required labour in order to make sure that our NHS keeps going, and we absolutely value the contribution that those from overseas who've come to work here in our National Health Service have made, are making, and will always continue to make.
Dame Leah Griffiths.
Much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, I have a constituent born and bred in Llanelli who is unable to bring in his foreign spouse because of the current earnings limit of £29,000. So the Home Secretary will be very aware that the government's Family Financial Requirements Review notes that a threshold of around the region of 23,000 to 25,000 would allow most British workers in full-time minimum wage jobs to qualify. So when will she be considering this review and looking again at the fairness of the current earnings thresholds?
What I would say to my honourable friend is we always keep those thresholds under review, and we will continue to do so in relation to family and bringing dependents over.
Sir Edward Lee.
Well, the Home Secretary loves our country, and I love her efforts, frankly, because it's not just the fate of this government that depends on her success, but good community relations and saving dozens of lives at sea, and let's be frank, probably our political fate also. So will she undertake to be judged not just by the strength of this announcement and words spoken in the House of Commons, but actually results, so that we do actually make a real contribution to stopping these boats? And so will she be prepared to constantly ratchet up the pressure so that if you're sitting in France, you think, is it worth the risk? I've got virtually no chance of being allowed to stay in Britain forever. I will have my case reviewed very regularly, every 2 years. I will be sent back where I came from when it's safe, and otherwise I'll go back to a return hub. Can we not all agree on that?
What I would say to the honourable gentleman is results are all that matters. It's incumbent on me to think about the way that we have to reform this system, to make a public argument for it, to win that argument, to persuade people, and then to get this done. What I care about now is making sure that we can deliver these proposals, and we will do so. And then I need to make sure that the Home Office is in a position to make sure that we can really run a system properly, administratively, and also fairly in the future. That is what matters. This is a low-trust environment for the public. We all of us involved in politics know that, and in the end the public have heard a lot of rhetoric from a lot of people, but this government intends to get on and deliver and to win the trust of the British people.
Louis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Home Secretary's statement, and in particular what she said about the more than 75,000 nurses who are working in our NHS who arrived in this country since 2021. Those nurses and other healthcare professionals were actively encouraged to come here to fill the gaps left by the previous government's failure to do NHS workforce planning. And since they arrived, they've served our communities and cared for our citizens with distinctions. So can I welcome what she said about maintaining a 5-year route for those who are engaged in public service? And could she just confirm that that would apply to NHS staff like those that I've mentioned? And could she furthermore say that how she will continue discussions with DHSC colleagues to ensure that there will be no unexpected reduction in NHS workforce staffing in the months ahead?
Yeah, well, my honourable friend is right about the contribution that those nurses and other staff in the National Health Service are making. He will know that we are consulting specifically on the element of the proposals that relates to public service and that getting you a 5-year discount on the qualifying period. No doubt he will make his own responses to that consultation. We have heard those too. But of course, in the normal run of things, public service would include those who work in our critical public services.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I broadly welcome the changes to ILR, but I seek clarification about whether there will be revocation for those already settled who break the law. And why is the government proposing making low-skilled workers who are net fiscal recipients wait for 15 years for ILR instead of telling them to just leave the country? And on the broader question of immigration, the government says it wants to get the numbers down. The Boris wave was a disgrace, that is correct. But of the measures implemented so far by this government, they are projected only to reduce the numbers of people coming here by 61,000 a year. That's before we take into account the new rules for Gaza, for Afghan dependents, and for the schemes launched this week by the Home Secretary. And it's in fact less than the revision by the ONS of the numbers coming last year. So if she does want to get the numbers down, when will the Home Secretary bring forward new policies to make sure that the number of visas issued falls by the hundreds of thousands as soon as possible?
The ability to revoke indefinite leave to remain, those powers are not going to change as a result of this, and he will know that the specific provisions in relation to foreign national offenders are also going to be unaffected. Separately, we are going to review the threshold in relation to criminality because the current rules have worked on the basis that you cannot qualify for indefinite leave to remain if you've received a sentence of 12 months or more. But given the changes that are being brought forward in the sentencing bill and others, we will be looking at all of that threshold in its entirety. He's raised a point around retrospectivity. We will also be reviewing that as we review all of the criminal thresholds that apply here. He said another question in the middle bit, and forgive me, I missed it. Well, if he will write to me, I will come back to him because I think he's asking about wage thresholds. He made a final point, which I did pick up, which was around modelling and essentially the numbers that we're talking about and whether 61,000 a year reduction is the right number. Let me just say to him, look, I will be coming to this House on a regular basis to be held to account for the delivery of these reforms and those that I set out on Monday in relation to the asylum system. It's a big package of reforms taken together. These are the biggest changes to settlement since 40 years, and the asylum package is also, one of the biggest packages of modern times. The combination of the two, I think, is going to keep modellers and others very, very busy over the coming months. But what I will promise the House is we'll be transparent on the data, on the numbers, and what our proposals will mean in practice. That will inevitably change as we design the new system as well. But they will always get transparency from me in this House.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I agree with the Home Secretary that our immigration system needs reform and that people are concerned about it. I think we should also be very clear in this House that we recognise the benefits of immigration to our country, the talents, the jobs, the entrepreneurship it brings in, and that nobody would ever argue that we will bring this country together by tearing families apart. On that basis, then, it is very welcome to hear the Home Secretary commit to a 5-year pathway for partners of British citizens, something that for many of my constituents has been a deeply concerning thing because they wouldn't ever wish the state to tell them who they could fall in love with. But given that some of those people are on different visas here, can she clarify the 5-year term, how that will be calculated, so that we don't inadvertently end up penalising people who fall in love with somebody who came on a worker's visa but has been here for 5 years? Love is love. Let's make sure in this country we welcome it.
None of the rules about marriage in country, as it were, are going to change. But I'd be very happy if she wants to send me some of her constituency examples to have a look at that. I think it's important that we have a distinction between what citizenship unlocks as a set of rights for British citizens compared to those who are working here, who may not have settled status, who may acquire settled status. I think it's right that in the consultation we open a question about what is unlocked in terms of the British state and your rights here at citizenship as well as at settlement. But I'd be very happy to discuss these matters with her in more detail, and I'm sure I will do so over the course of the next few months.
Josh Babarinde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many migrant survivors of domestic abuse apply to settle in the UK permanently if their relationship has broken down because of domestic violence or abuse. And the Right Honourable Lady knows just how close this issue is to my heart. So will she reassure this House and survivors of domestic abuse that they will be protected under her reforms and that her changes to ILR will not have the adverse and maybe unintended impact of locking those survivors into abusive relationships?
Well, firstly, let me put on my record congratulations to the Honourable Gentleman for his engagement. Let me also say, you know, he is an assiduous campaigner based on his own experiences in relation to domestic abuse, and he and I have had many debates across this chamber on those matters before, and I respect very much the perspective he brings and the way in which he constructively engages with the debate. I can give him that assurance. We will continue to have pathways to settlement for victims of domestic violence and other vulnerable groups as well. And what we're seeking to do in the consultation is to invite views and perspectives about how some of the changes might have perhaps unintended consequences and how we can ensure that those pathways continue to exist in the future. And I'm sure he will be engaging with the consultation in that regard.
Alison Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I agree with the Home Secretary that fairness must be at the heart of the immigration system, but can I ask her to say a little bit more about the route to settlement for the Ukrainian families who generous constituents of mine have opened up their doors to following the horrific invasion of their country?
Well, friend, nothing we've said today changes the position of those who've come to this country on the Ukrainian scheme. That is a bespoke scheme for the people who've arrived here from Ukraine. It's in fact not seen as a refugee route, it's seen as a temporary scheme, but all of those provisions that are in that were supported by us in opposition. They continue to be supported by us in government, and nothing in relation to the position of Ukrainians in this country is going to change as a result of anything in the asylum policy statement or the command paper today.
Sir Julian Lewis.
As the descendant of immigrant grandparents, I have a high degree of empathy with the Home Secretary's opening remarks about her own family. Would she agree with me that the reason that both main parties are facing the possibility of an electoral bloodbath is not so much about the overall levels of immigration, but about that fraction of it, which is still a very large number of people who come to this country on small boats and by other illegal means. We do not know what they believe, we do not know what values they have, and in many cases, because they destroy their documents, we do not even know who they are. Can she explain how the measures she's outlined today will have an impact on deterring that sort of person from breaking into our country?
Well, let me say to the honourable gentleman, I've acknowledged the way that the way the system is working or not working being more the appropriate way to describe it, is causing deep unease across the country, including in my constituency, including of those people who are of immigrant backgrounds themselves. And it is that sense of unfairness. A lot of people in my constituency regularly report to me what they see as abuse of visas, overstaying as a particular problem. Others are more concerned about small boats. I acknowledge that those concerns are legitimate and real and felt deeply across the country. That's why I think it's so important that we rebuild public trust in the overall system, both dealing with illegal migration and legal migration as well, based on the principles of fairness and contribution, and give public confidence that the rules that we have can be maintained, can be enforced, and that they will be followed properly. He's right that things like the destruction of documents and other ways in which people seek to frustrate our ability to remove them from this country is driving some of the discontent. That is why the reforms that I've set out in the asylum policy statement are designed to say to those making the calculus in the north of France, don't get on a boat, it's not worth it, that is not the way to come to this country. And it is why, as we build safe and legal routes into this country, which will be a clearly much more privileged way of entering this country with a faster path to settlement, as I've said today, at 10 years, it will show people making that calculus very clearly which path is worth it and which one is not.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the assurance that the Home Secretary has given to those who have achieved indefinite leave to remain and have settled status in this country. That certainty is really important. She will know that in my own constituency, I have many families who are from Syria, many families who are from Afghanistan. They came on the Syrian programme and under Operation Pitting, and they have limited leave to remain. But they are deeply worried, from what the Home Secretary said, as to whether they will ultimately be deported from this country. Can she give assurance to those who are currently seeking ILR, who came on those programmes, that they will be able to follow the path that was set out for them when they arrived? Would she give that assurance and make sure that this country will never do a deal with the Taliban to deport back from this country women and children?
Well, we will always have specific obligations in relation to not returning anybody who's arrived and arrived in this country seeking asylum or has been granted refugee status. We would not return those individuals to danger. We will abide by our international obligations, and I hope I did make that clear in the debate on Monday. The ability of us, though, to have new rules that look more carefully and more regularly at whether a country is safe for citizens to be returned to, I think is important, and it is a shift in the way that we do things. But we will never return people to face danger, and I'd be happy to look at some of the examples that he has raised today in more detail with him.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I first of all want to apologise to the Home Secretary for missing part of her statement, but I have read it. Can she confirm whether any assessment has been carried out on the economic impact on Scotland of extending the ILR wait time to 10 years and beyond? And if not, why not? So whatever, Madam Deputy Speaker, the needs of Wales and Northern Ireland, Scotland's economic and workforce needs have once again appeared to have been ignored. Does the Home Secretary understand that such a blanket policy risks exacerbating skills shortages, threatening vital sectors, and making it harder for communities to thrive? And incredibly, for a so-called Labour government, this lurch to the right now appears to favour the wealthy over the less wealthy.
Secretary.
Really, Madam Deputy Speaker, he will know that immigration is a reserved matter. That will not change. The thing that's holding back the labour market in Scotland is skills and education policy, which is devolved, and it's on the SNP to sort that out.
Natalie Fleet.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In 2024, in the run-up to the election, I knocked on door after door where they told me that they were absolutely sick of our broken immigration system that we had inherited from the Tories, and they did not trust reform, who aren't here today to tackle. I welcome the intervention from our Home Secretary. Does the Home Secretary agree with me that in order to be the open, tolerant and generous country that we know that we are, we must get order and control at our borders?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This is an open, tolerant and generous country. And what I have acknowledged in the reforms I've set out both today and on Monday is that there is a condition to unlocking the full extent of that openness, that tolerance and that generosity. And it is about having order and control at our borders, a fair, managed asylum and immigration system where the principles of fairness and contribution are at the heart of it. That is the way that we can prove to the public it is possible not just to have an asylum system at all, but one that they can also be proud of.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
I'm not sure it helps the Home Secretary's cause me to have a great deal of respect for her, and I thought her interventions this week particularly pointed towards members of her own party on the left, that actually they are going to make the cause they choose to champion more difficult if they don't get this system under control as a whole was very important. Actually, those people that support asylum and refugee processes and want them to be there in the future need the system to be brought under control. But my sincere question relates to what I would describe as the tinkering around the edges of the human rights laws. The Home Secretary must know that whatever she does to clarify the fringes of the rulings that the ECHR has made over the years and created a case law that forces our judges to rule in the favour of spurious claims, can't change that. That those rulings are those rulings, unless we're willing to, at the very least, derogate from some elements of the court's decisions. How does the Home Secretary really think that we can override those well-established rulings that give enormous amounts of rights to people when they're making their asylum claims?
Yeah, that's right. That's enough of it.
Well, look, I think he and I have an obvious point of difference on the European Convention on Human Rights. This government will not be leaving that European Convention. We don't see the case for derogation or any other measures. We do believe it is possible to achieve the reforms that we need by legislating for the way in which Article 8 applies to immigration cases, by defining family life and more tightly drawing up what is known as the public interest test. We will debate that legislation in this House in a great deal of detail, but I hope to show to everyone who is currently a sceptic of our ability to stay in the ECHR and get control of our migration system that it is possible to do both of those things, to abide by convention rights, the Human Rights Act, which has brought those rights into our domestic legislation. It's a very important piece of international, it's an important international treaty, and we don't see any reason to leave it or derogate from it. But I do hope that members opposite will engage in good faith on the changes that we seek to make to Article 8 and the immigration rules in particular, because we think that is one of the best changes we can make to get control of our migration system.
Members will notice that we have got two debates after this business. So if I could ask remaining members, I'm going to finish this statement in around 10 minutes. So if I could ask remaining members to please keep the questions and then the Minister keep the answers short. Orinda Just.
Deputy Speaker, excuse me, as I am someone who was not born in this country, does the Home Secretary agree that we should not stop talking about the benefits of immigration whilst managing migration, and as she has already acknowledged that we will always offer sanctuary to those truly fleeing peril, does she also accept that for those people we should be making settlement and integration into British society quicker and easier and not more difficult?
Well, firstly, I hope he will reflect on how I opened my statement today and how I closed it. I see the benefits of migration. I wouldn't be here if this country hadn't welcomed my parents. It is literally the story of my life and how I have managed to get from there to this dispatch box today. So I very much feel those benefits personally, and I will always speak up for them, as I have done today, as I did on Monday, and as I will always do as I make the case for the need for these reforms out there in the country. I hope he and others will always support me on that. I know they will. I've also made clear clear that we will always offer sanctuary. I want us to be a country that offers sanctuary to those who are in need. That is why it is so crucial that we get order and control back into our asylum system and open up new safe and legal routes. And it is important that today I've confirmed that those safe and legal routes will have the earlier 10-year path to settlement. That is what will enable the integration we all want to see.
Slade.
Deputy Speaker. In the summer, I spent the morning with Anushka, a senior social care worker for Autism Together Care in Wimborne. She and her colleagues earn more than the earnings threshold and came here on the understanding with their families that they could make a new life here, contributing to society, paying their taxes. And the recent hostile narrative is making her and others consider leaving for places like New Zealand and Australia. So can the Home Secretary confirm whether Anushka and her colleagues doing jobs that cannot be filled by British workers who won't do the work will be considered public sector workers?
Good question.
Well, these will be matters for the consultation. I would encourage her to engage with that. We have specifically put in an element around public service because we recognise the specific contributions made by those who fill the gaps in our labour market that we are not able to do otherwise. What I would say to her on the general principle is settlement is not a right. It is, I think, absolutely fair for a government to say that it's something that has to be earned. It is not unusual for countries to change their settlement requirements. That's quite normal, happens all over the world, as British citizens who work abroad know all too well as well. And the proposal for going from 5 years to 10 years will not change, but all of the other measures that I've said today are subject to consultation. I would encourage her to engage with that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Home Secretary's statement today, the care and the fairness with which she has crafted these proposals and the incentives that they imbibe too. Because from my work on the International Development Committee, I've seen the immense negative impact of global displacement and the lost over $20 billion of economic activity every year from developing countries. And then, of course, there's the impact, too, of asylum accommodation on our overseas assistance budget. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that these measures might, whilst they might ostensibly seem harsh, there is nothing progressive that well-meaning people on the left of politics should be excusing in a situation where thousands of people are risking their lives across the English Channel from already safe countries?
I think it's immoral if we stand by and watch people make dangerous crossings, pay thousands of pounds to criminals and put their lives and those of others at risk, and we stand back and do nothing. I think that would just be a total dereliction of duty. I also think it would be a dereliction of duty for a Labour government to continue to preside over a broken system or not have the mettle to get ahead and reform that and watch us lose public consent for having an asylum system at all. I think it's existential for us having public consent for that asylum system, and that is why all of these changes are so necessary.
And with a very short question, Bobby Dean.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And can I thank the Home Secretary for a confirmation about the 5-year pathway for Hong Kongers. That is a promise kept to them. The statement today was otherwise a series of push measures, and I'm always fascinated by how when you come down to the individual decisions to make within the system, how much more difficult it gets. So if I could push her on the Boris wave, which she has criticised, the vast majority of those figures are made up by Hong Kongers arriving here under the B&O scheme, Ukrainian refugees, and student deferred visas after the COVID pandemic. So which of those measures does she think was a mistake?
Well, look, I was very clear about our responsibilities towards Hong Kongers, that the issues in relation to the Ukraine scheme are not going to change, but he will also know the stats in relation to health and care visa holders, primarily those who came to work in adult social care work. They will be the main contributors to the settlement increase between 2027 and 2029, because they will be making up nearly half of all settlement grants in 2028. So look, I think the figures here really do speak for themselves. It is important that the government moves to deal with such a vast number that is happening over the next few years. I think it is right that we therefore extend the path to settlement and ask some questions about how we manage the situation in the future.
Sarah Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you, Home Secretary, and I entirely agree that we need control of our borders in this country. In respect of transitional arrangements, over the next 12 years there will be an 83% increase in the over 80s in my constituency. Health and care visa workers are currently providing critical services to many of my constituents and supporting the NHS as well. Please can she confirm how the transitional arrangements will ensure that that care continues to be provided to my constituents?
Well, look, the Health Secretary and his department are, of course, always reviewing and considering the arrangements we need to make sure that we have a workforce capable of sustaining the National Health Service. We do have an ageing population that brings its own specific challenges as well. What we are talking about here today is not preventing people from being able to work in our National Health Service. It's about the pathway to settlement. It's about extending from 5 years to 10 and then thinking about the rules that we need that might bring that number down from 10 and closer to the 5, or that might increase it instead. And I would encourage her in that spirit to engage with the detail, and I'd be happy to talk to her offline as well.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Home Secretary announced a consultation on a 5-year pathway to settlement for those that work in the public sector to recognise the particular value they play in society. Please will she put this to the vote of MPs to ensure that we can ensure that those that work in organisations fundamental to the public sector, like those that work in hospices, including the amazing hospice in my constituency, Woking and Sandbear, are always included in the 5-year pathway?
All of these measures will be taken through in the usual way.
And with the final question, Mark Sewards.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm absolutely delighted to hear the Home Secretary announce that we will keep our promise to British national overseas visa holders from Hong Kong. It's something I've been working with my constituents on over the last few months to lobby the government on, and I'm delighted the government has listened. Now, as well as transnational repression, they bring other issues to me too. Many Hong Kongers in Leeds South-West and Morley are highly skilled, they have excellent qualifications, but the employers in this country don't necessarily recognise them, which makes it that much harder to get the first job. So will the Home Secretary work with other departments across government to help employers in this country recognise the amazing contribution that Hong Kongers can make to the UK economy?
Well, he makes a very important point. It's not the direct responsibility of the Home Office, but I will ensure that those conversations are happening across government, and I will make sure a minister from DBT writes to him on this matter.
And that concludes the statement. I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over. Welcome to the Select Committee statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. Andy Slaughter will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions are taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to ask questions on the subject of the statement. These should be brief questions, not full speeches. Can I emphasise that questions should be directed to the Select Committee Chair and not the relevant Government Minister? Front benchers may take part in questioning. I call Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Backbench Business Committee for allocating time for me to make a statement on behalf of the Justice Committee. This is the 7th report of the Committee on Rehabilitation in Prisons. This time last year, the Justice Committee began its principal inquiry to look at the crisis of reoffending against the backdrop of a broken criminal justice system. Around 80% of all offending is reoffending. This figure alone suggests